Welcome to Patriots 4th and 2, the official podcast of PatsFans.com.
We are back on Patriots 4th and 2, the official podcast, PatsFans.com. I'm Russ Goldman. Along with me is Steve Balsherry and Derek Havens. In this episode, we will be previewing the upcoming game for the Patriots against the Steelers. We will also have our Around the League segment where each one of us brings up a topic for us to discuss. But guys, we have to talk about what happened on Sunday. It's been a few days now, so I think I've calmed down a little bit, and I really have not watched or listened to anything or read pretty much nothing on this game because I didn't want to talk about it. Now it's time to talk about it, but before we do that, I have an apology to make to the listeners of Patriots 4th and 2, all my followers on Twitter, and especially to you guys, Steve and Derek. After the game, I reacted very badly on Twitter, and it was a reaction to trolls that I was seeing on Twitter coming at me after the game, and I basically said, I'm done with hosting the show because of the actual loss to the Dolphins. But it really wasn't about that. It had to do with the Twitter trolls, and I took it badly, and I reacted in a very bad way.
Say it ain't so.
Say it isn't
Say it
so.
ain't so.
Of course, it wouldn't be the first time, Steve. And as Bill Parcells always says, I reserve the right to change my mind. So I'm back here hosting the show. It was a stupid thing I did. So let's just leave that where it is. But I just wanted to mention that at the beginning of the show. But let's now talk about the debacle in Miami. And guys, I'll just start off by saying the closest thing that I've seen to how that game ended was the Music City Miracle. That was the closest thing that I can remember seeing. I can't remember the last time this has happened to the Patriots. I think it would probably have to go all the way back to maybe the 70s or 80s that I can remember. Maybe you guys can bring up some games that remind you of that. But this was just an epic way to lose a game. And Derek, I'll go to you. Just share whatever you want about this game.
Well, certainly the ending was absolutely shocking. And from the media members that have spoken out about this, I know yep. I've listened to them speak about it, and they talk about that locker room being about as stunned as they can remember. Some have compared it to the locker room after the Patriots lost in Arizona to the Giants in Super Bowl 42 and back in 2007. Some have compared it to the Seahawks locker room after the Malcolm Butler interception in 2014, also in Arizona. They said there were, there's a lot of guys just sitting at their locker, blank stares on their face, lost for words. You could tell in Gronk's face after the game. You could look at how Devin McCourty was speaking. There were a lot of player reactions that pretty much, kind of resulted in how the game ended. I mean, everyone was stunned, and there's a lot of question marks coming out of this game. I think there's a lot of people to blame. Certainly, there's a lot of fans that are angry at different people. And I think, look, you have to look at this team as a whole and say that every single person's accountable. I'm pretty annoyed at the fact it seems to only get pinned on one person, and which is Stephen Gostkowski and Rob Gronkowski. I personally, I think Rob Gronkowski gets almost no blame at all. But that's just me. I think that if you can look at the offense, the defense, the special teams, especially the coaching, and say that every single phase of that game, there was someone that deserves a piece of that loss. As far as Gronkowski goes on the last play, I think that's more of a coaching issue. I think there are a lot of questions. Every player was expecting a lateral. They said that after the game. So you really don't have a chance of a Hail Mary there. So you should have someone who's quick and who can change directions quickly and who's used to tackling in space. That's not what your 6'7" tight end normally does, especially one who we've all talked about has been kind of lumbering this whole season. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. I mean, it's sad because Tom Brady threw a few dimes this week, and Rob Gronkowski played a tremendous game, and the defense looks pretty good at times. The special teams looks pretty good at times. But unfortunately, the narrative and the entire game changed on the last play, and that's really all there is to talk about, and why they lost, how they lost, but that's just how it goes, and because it is a 60-minute ball game, and it was one of the most incredible things I've seen, one of the biggest highlight plays we've seen, and it really puts the Patriots in a bad position. I mean, I think that, you can pretty much kiss the number one seed goodbye. You had an opportunity to be right in the mix for it still, and the Chiefs have two really hard games coming up, so you can never say never. But now you're going to be fighting for that number 2 seed, and you're looking at this game versus Pittsburgh and saying the winner of this game will probably be the one who gets the number 2 seed at the end of the day.
I disagree with that, because the Steelers need help, because the Patriots.
Well, the Steelers have been awful. They've lost 3 of the last 4 games.
Right.
They've been really.
Yeah, but the Steelers have the tie, Derek. The Steelers have the tie, so it actually could bring another team into it. But the Steelers really are in a very bad situation to get the number 2 seed, even if they win this game.
My thing with the Steelers is they're in the mix, as many teams are. I mean, the AFC is there's just a lot of people in the mix. So
Houston's still in the mix.
Steelers, put it this way: this game is not losable. If you lose this game, I don't care if it's the Steelers or somebody else. You are putting yourself in position to playing on wild card weekend. And I just don't think
that's not 100%, but I understand that you're leaving yourself open.
Well,
but
I said you're putting yourself in position to do that.
Yeah.
And the way you've played on the road this year, you can't afford to do that. The way that the team has looked, and injury-wise, the way Brady's arm has been the last few years, you need the bye, you need the rest. So you can't afford to put yourself in this position. And again, this team has done it over and over and over and over again this year, where they have been not playing consistent football. You asked if I believed or trusted or whatever the hell you said in the defense last week.
Yep.
How do you feel about that? Because they've done the same crap all year. The coaching has been terrible.
See, I put that more on the coaching than I do anything else.
Of course, you put on the coaching, and that's the worst thing about it. The special teams.
Boy, Derek's getting upset.
One of the best kickers in the league, and you left 4 points on the field. Brady's debacle at the end of the first half, in my mind,
mental errors,
Derek. The game.
Mental errors.
I mean, Brady cost them the game, in my opinion. He missed Hogan, and then he took the sack when he shouldn't have, because he said that he thought he had another timeout. I think that's worse. When does Tom Brady make that mistake? If Baker Mayfield makes that mistake, I say, okay, he's a rookie. Brady's been in the league for 19 years. He cost the team 3 to 7 points right there.
I understand where you're going on this, but I agree with pretty much everything you're saying here. For me, and Steve, I want to go to you because Derek has brought up a lot of points in this game. Start off by focusing on the last play, but if I look at the overall picture, for me, the reason why the Patriots lost this game is mental errors, and it's on all phases and the coaching. And when Derek was talking about how badly the defense looked and how much yardage they gave up running the ball, I agree with that. It was horrible. But I think a portion of this, the blame should be on the coaching staff for not putting the Patriots defense in the right positions to succeed. Because when they made the adjustments, Patriots defense looked a lot better. So you have to ask yourself, why did they have to make the adjustments? Why were they not prepared defensively? Because I don't think they were, Steve. And then Derek brought up the points about Brady, Gronkowski, the last play of the game, the coaching decision to have Gronkowski out there. This, to me, comes down to mental errors. I know it's simplistic to put it on it, but this is a team that does not beat themselves. They beat themselves against Miami. That's the way I look at it.
Exactly. That's what I wrote on Sunday. That's what I said yesterday on another podcast. Unforced mental mistakes.
Yep.
Terrible situational football. This is a team that prides itself on never beating itself.
And they did.
That's the Patriots mantra. We're not going to make a mistake. We're going to wait till you make a mistake. Well, they had plenty of unforced mistakes in this game. And it starts, you can go right down the line.
Yeah.
Tom Brady, when is Tom Brady forgotten? that he didn't have any timeouts left at the end of a half. That was unfathomable. He missed Hogan, and I've been saying for the longest time, that play used to be a staple of this offense. That back against the corner of the back line of the end zone. How many times have we seen Hogan, Gronkowski, Danny Amendola make that catch, and it's an easy touchdown? And they hadn't used that play, I think, all season. And then they finally run it. Chris Hogan's wide open.
Yep.
And Brady overthrows him by a long shot. Stephon Gilmore drops a pick six. I mean, Julian Edelman, who had a tremendous game, starts running without the football. When does Edelman make a mistake like that? And then, Gostkowski, who's one of the best kickers in the league, has a terrible game.
Yep.
It cost him 4 points, and which would have rendered that final play moot. But then you go to that final play, and there was breakdowns all over the place,
everywhere.
Like everyone had never seen that before, which is ridiculous. First of all, Gronkowski doesn't belong on the field.
Correct.
When has Ryan Tannehill been able to throw the ball 75 yards in the air? Because that's why they have him out there.
Of course,
is to defend it. You just signed a 6'4" athletic freak in Obi Melifonwu, which if you thought he was going to throw the ball 75 yards, why not put the guy with a 40-inch vertical leap out there, who's almost as tall as Gronk anyway, and can leap 40 inches? That's the guy I couldn't believe it when I heard them say, because you couldn't even see Gronk, he was out of the picture. And I was like, first of all, Tannehill isn't going to throw the ball that far, but if he was, why is Gronk out there, not Melifonwu? That to me was ridiculous. And then the final play, Jonathan Jones. I mean, there's 7 seconds left in the game. Miami has no timeouts. They throw the ball 20 yards down the field to Kenny Stills. Jones is in perfect position to make the tackle. Game over.
Yes, he is.
Instead, he makes a play on the ball, which is ridiculous, because if you knock it down, there's still going to be a tick left. They're going to have another shot at it. Just make the tackle. The game's over. He takes a ridiculous Jordan Richards-esque angle. He misses the ball. Now he's running free. Your other cornerbacks are all playing for the next lateral. J.C. Jackson and Stephon Gilmore were just jogging la-di-da and down the field waiting for another lateral.
Right.
And what happens? Everyone forgets about the guy running with the football. Next thing you know, he has the angle on a lumbering Gronk. It's not his fault that he's out there.
Nope.
And that's what you get. You reap what you sow. And this was a terrible coaching decision by the Patriots. And it was a whole day. They should have won this game by 2 to 3 touchdowns easy. Miami is a vastly inferior team to them. And, it was everywhere. The defensive line was horrible. And the only thing worse than the defensive line was the linebackers and run support. When you see Brandon Bolden, I love Brandon Bolden, don't get me wrong. But when he runs through you for 54 yards like he shot out of a cannon and no one's even close to him, you have to look at yourself in the mirror and say, where the heck was I on that play? Because they got washed out horribly by a really iffy offensive line. This offensive line of Miami's is not good. And
what's funny, Steve, is for one, as soon as Bolden scored, I literally instantly thought of Murph, and I go, I was cussing him out of my head. I'm like, screw you, Brandon Bolden.
Well, it's funny. I sent Murph a tweet because I said, "Hey Murph, GFY," and then I put LOL when he scored that, because I know Murph's the biggest Brandon Bolden fan.
And that's a theme. And you know what, Steve and Russ, it's been a theme on the road. Is every single road game, you can look at one of their biggest weaknesses being the offensive and defensive lines. They lose the point of attack.
I wouldn't say that against the Bears, except for the whole Trubisky thing. But I thought they stopped the run against the Bears.
Only one of the games. That's
okay.
Miami doesn't have a good offensive line. That's their weakness. And they did a good job of getting after Tannehill.
They did,
but they were terrible. Miami averaged 9.2 yards a carry. That's almost a first down every
I know.
time they run the ball. And this was not a team that running the football has been a strength this year.
Okay, very good.
I mean, I was worried about that they were going to try to focus on the run and make it kind of a lopsided offense for the Patriots. And I knew that it kind of sounded stupid last week because how terrible Miami's run defense has been. But the Patriots couldn't even run the ball well. They averaged less than 3 yards a carry. So, I mean,
2.7 yards a carry against a team that's been averaging, allowing 144 yards a game and over 5 yards a carry.
Well, guys, that's actually a good point. I'm glad that
sense.
Steve's bringing this up because let's focus on the offense because this is something that's been puzzling me. Talking about the running game for the Patriots offensively, and then we'll talk about the defense. Steve, the Patriots offense, let's just go to the Jets game. Let's go to the Vikings game. They were able to run the ball, and the Vikings have a good run defense. The Jets don't. Against the Dolphins don't have a very good run defense. They don't. So what were they doing?
It's not not very good. It's terrible.
Correct. So I'm asking you, as someone that watches the all 22s, why? I'm asking why.
I'll tell you why.
They were dominated to adjust?
They were absolutely dominated at the point of attack. They got no push. You watch those runs with Sony Michel. He's getting hit at or behind the line of scrimmage in almost every one.
Okay.
That's being dominated. And now only a few times Miami's would send the linebackers on a blitz, but the linebackers were very active. They keyed on the run.
Alonso was everywhere, Steve.
Yeah, but at the same time, they were burning him with play action passes. But the fact remains that Miami's front four totally won that matchup. Totally. Okay. It wasn't even close to where, the Patriots' offensive line was getting no push. It's one thing if you're pushing them back and a linebacker shoots the gap. They were getting no push.
Sure. No, I agree with you. I totally agree with you. But I also want to give the Dolphins credit. I'm having a hard time giving them credit at all because I normally like to give the team that wins credit, but I think this has more to do. This is the exception to my rule. This has a lot more to do with what the Patriots didn't do.
And in the line of scrimmage, I totally give the Dolphins all the credit.
Yeah.
Because they kicked the Patriots' ass up and down the field in the running game. They totally dominated that. Totally.
They did.
It wasn't even close.
Right. And that's the negative. But let's talk about the other side of this because, again, I think the three of us are all in agreement that the Patriots lost this game. And I don't like saying it that way, but it just, to me, this is the exception to the rule. They lost the game. But offensively, Steve, and then I want to go to you, Derek, the Patriots could do whatever they wanted through the air, Steve. Would you agree with me? Because, again, I kept hearing how Tom Brady can't throw the ball anymore. He looked like the Tom Brady to me.
He threw 2 dimes back to back. They had a 3rd and 10. He threw a 16-yard laser to Julian Edelman, and then the 37-yard touchdown pass to Cordell Patterson. Those were, if you think he's lacking arm strength, just rewatch those 2 plays back to back.
Now, second half was a different story, like you said.
Second half was a different story because they couldn't run the football.
Yep.
And they were trying to run the football, and they kept getting themselves in 3rd and long situations. And that's why they only scored 6 points. Miami did a better job in the second half. But again, the Patriots, I thought they made too many mistakes. They let an inferior team hang around long enough to steal the win.
Yeah, absolutely. Derek, over to you. Again, Steve brings up very good points about the problem the Patriots will have running the ball, and it comes down to the offensive line not getting any push, and you have to give the Dolphins credit for that because they dominated the Patriots' offensive line. But through the air, like we're talking about in the first half, I thought the Patriots could do whatever they wanted. And I'm bringing this up because I keep hearing this term by the national media, noodle arm. I've heard noodle arm a lot leading up to this game, that Tom Brady has a noodle arm. Please tell me you're not buying into that anymore.
No, and I've actually never heard anybody say that.
Oh, I've heard
seriously.
it. I've heard it
I've
comparing
never heard
him to
anyone say
Peyton
it
Manning at the
seriously,
end.
but
I've heard it.
well, I've heard it from Peyton Manning, but that was true. I mean, you could look at
Right.
you could look at the beginning of the season, the end of the season. It was like a different player. It was weird, And Tom Brady in this game, I don't know what happened in the second half. Maybe his Metamucil wore off. I'm not sure what happened, but I just feel like for the offense, they just could not consistently put themselves in position to succeed. And like Steve said, they put themselves in third and long way too often in the second half. They couldn't run the ball. The offensive line was getting dominated. They had a lot of mental errors. I mean, I said on the opening take that I blamed this loss on Brady. I don't necessarily blame it all on Brady. But I do put a large portion on Brady. I put a large portion on Bill and the coaching staff. And I mean, you can look at so many different factors in this game.
Sure, of course
to say
you can.
why, and we knew that. I thought the Patriots would win this game by a touchdown. I figured, okay, weird shit always happens in Miami. It is a fact. It's like death, taxes, Patriots struggle in Miami.
Totally agree.
But I thought that they were better, and I thought after that Vikings game, I was sipping the Russ Goldman Kool-Aid a little bit too hard, and I said, you know what? They're going to win. It's going to be easy, no problems. They're a better team. Maybe the Dolphins keep it a little competitive, but they're a better team. It's fine. And then they fall on their face again. And I'm not sure. I think we're going to find out a lot about this team's character, in the following weeks, how they respond to this. Because I do think that the way that ended the game on Sunday and the way the players responded or sounded after the game, if they come out looking flat on Sunday, I'm going to be really worried. If they come out and
I'll put money on it that they don't, Derek, because
well, I hope
again,
not. I hope not.
I wouldn't want to be a player this week. I would not want to be a Patriots player this week.
Well, I can almost guarantee you, I would put my first child up on paper saying that Bill Belichick sat in front of the team first thing and put that on himself. I will almost guarantee you that Bill told the team that he screwed up, that there was a lot of coaching decisions in that game.
You're probably right.
He took responsibility, and I think that he's going to force the players to make themselves accountable as well to their other teammates. And I think not only are they going to have to self-scout and figure out what the F happened, they're going to have to also get ready for Pittsburgh. And now it is going to be a tough atmosphere in Pittsburgh. It's going to be they have a lot of weapons, and there's no doubt in my mind that Pittsburgh's going to be juiced up for the game. They've really been reeling at an awful time. I mean, there's still a situation the Browns can make the playoffs, and trust me, win the division. And trust me, there's nothing I'd love to see more than to have that happen. But I want to see, what kind of balls and heart this Patriots team has, and I think that you'll see it in the way they respond this week. And it's important. If you think this team is still a contender, which I think they're a contender, I just don't think they've been as strong as in the past. They need to show something in this game, and they need to respond to what happens, because that's always the telltale sign of a champion, is how they respond in situations like this.
Okay. Very good there, Derek. Very interesting discussion here. And guys, let's transition. Let's talk about the defense, and then we're going to wrap up from talking about this debacle. So, Steve, I want to go to you, because there are two ways to look at this. Obviously, you talked about the whole situation with the running game, especially in the first half, giving up all those long runs. But I also put a decent portion of this on the coaching, because they were in certain packages, and they actually ended up changing that in the second half. They went to, bigger packages in the second half, which helped against the run. But
no,
in the first,
didn't. They didn't stop the run in the second half either. Come on now. They did not stop the run in the second half either. I mean, you can't sit here and say, oh, well, they shut down the run. No, they were still getting gashed. They went to a different package, yes, but and this part of it, I do not put it on the coaching. This was the players, because Miami wasn't doing anything that you haven't seen before. They were lining up, they were handing the ball to Frank Gore, and they were running the ball, and they ran it right down your throat. And your linebackers kept getting washed out where they weren't even in the. I mean, how many times did we see them get just pushed around? The defensive line was getting pushed around. They did go to a bigger package, but Miami still ran the ball effectively in the second half.
Yeah, but there weren't these breakaway runs that there were in the first half.
There wasn't a 54-yard touchdown run.
That's what I meant. What I meant is that you didn't have.
Well, I mean, if that's where we're setting the bar, we're setting it kind of low, because okay, they didn't give up a 54-yard touchdown to Brandon Bolden, but
the point was,
don't
Steve,
think
that I put a lot of this on Flores and Belichick, because I don't think he had the defense prepared. Because when they made the adjustments, when they went to the amoeba defense, they really got after Tannehill, and that was in the second half. That when they really got after him. So
they did a good job all game long of getting after Tannehill.
I totally disagree. They did not do that early. They had a hard time getting at him. He had all day in the very beginning portions of that game.
They had 3 sacks in the first half.
Until they started to make adjustments.
They had 3 sacks in the first half.
How was that opening drive?
Well, the opening drive is come on, Russ. When have the Patriots ever looked dominant on the opening drive of a football game defensively? They always play vanilla, and they see what the other team wants to do.
Well, I disagree with you. I put a lot of this on the coaches. The players didn't execute. That's number 2. But I thought that they were better when they made the adjustments. Sorry, I put a lot of the defensive issues on the coaching.
Well, I mean, that's fine. I wasn't a fan of the way they coached this game completely, but I'm not putting this defensive. I'm
not giving them a pass. They were bad. No, they were bad.
They were terrible. They were terrible against the run. Now, against the pass, again, you go back to that. Kenny Stills was just giving Jason McCourty fits all game long. They finally replaced him with J.C. Jackson. The rest of Miami's offensive wide receivers, nobody caught more than 1 pass.
Yeah.
I mean, you can take with that as you will. They got that 1 touchdown.
Well, Jason McCourty has been good. Jason McCourty had been good all year, and he was.
Jason McCourty's been excellent all year.
Yeah.
And he couldn't cover Stills in this game to save his life. He couldn't do it. And you have the ancient dinosaur Frank Gore just gashing your defense left and right. I mean, he's 35 years old. I mean, he's a Hall of Fame talent. He's an incredible player, but he's 35, and he looked like he just got it looks like he had some of the TB12's electrolytes, and he was flying through your defense, just slicing right through it. I mean, you have Malcolm Brown, who was getting just absolutely bent over and spanked this game constantly. He's been an absolute bust. Danny Shelton's a healthy scratch now because he's the most invisible 370-pound guy you've ever seen in your entire life. I mean, they couldn't set the edge. They couldn't tackle. They had terrible discipline. I mean, the entire defense smelled like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah, and to me, the linebackers were worse. I mean, your linebackers have to fill some gaps. And when they keep getting washed out 4 or 5 yards away from the play.
See, guys, I totally disagree with you on this. You're making it sound like the defense was horrible against the pass, which you've already said that they haven't. You could say against the run. I completely agree with you. But against the pass, I thought they were very good.
We're talking about the run, Russ. We're not talking about the pass. We're talking about the run.
Okay.
Yeah, and against the pass, they weren't great against the pass, but they were getting pressure. So that's what made the difference. They forced some bad throws.
Yeah, they did.
And, that 1 touchdown to Bryce Butler, I thought was a great throw by Tannehill.
Yeah.
But, the key was that Miami was in good situations all game long because of the running game.
Yeah.
Whereas Tom Brady was 3rd and 8, 3rd and 7, every time in the second half.
Yep.
Tannehill was in 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1.
Great point. No
you
matter
remember
how you
back
slice
when
it
was
and dice
the
it, this is just
Bury
a
the
epic
football?
fail.
When was the Bury the football game back in the 2000s, like early 2000s?
It was against
Remember
Miami.
that?
It was against
Yeah,
Miami.
this is time. It's one of those games again.
I agree, Derek.
They need to look at the film, look at the corrections they need to make, and
Yep.
all the coaching staff and players, they need to take accountability. They need to bury this effing ball, and they need
Yep.
to move on to Pittsburgh. And like
Yep.
I said before, they have to turn the page. They have to set their sights, and they have to come out with they have to kind of put it on the line this week. I know I mean, yes, if they lose this week, are there still scenarios that they can get the number 2 seed? Of course they can, of course. But I think they need to respond in a very strong way this week. And I was kind of hoping that after the Vikings game, we were going to see them build and build and build going into the postseason. This is a tough wrench to get kind of thrown into the mix at the end of the season like this, where guys start questioning themselves and questioning others.
But it happened last year against Miami as well, Derek. I mean, it happened last season, and look what happened. They got to the Super Bowl. So there are two ways to look at it. I hear what you're saying. It's how you respond from this. I totally agree with you on that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
But you don't think a loss in that way where guys are – you don't think Devin McCourty's just stunned and also being like, why the F was I not on the field?
Again, I haven't listened or watched any comments from any of the players. All I will tell you is that what you said earlier, Derek, is true. What you said, the game's coming up, the game against Pittsburgh can be telling because you can learn a lot about your team. Will they come out and will they not react well? Well, then you're going to end up being right, what you've been talking about this team throughout the year. Maybe, the right type of team for the Patriots, a team that's good enough to, say, go to the Super Bowl. You could end up being right. But if they respond the way that the team usually responds, then you can take something out of a loss. And that's what I'm looking to see. And, guys,
I
we're going to
agree.
be talking about –
they need to.
Yeah, no, they totally do. And I'm going to tell you right now, they ideally have the right opponent because – and we'll be talking about it in just a bit about the Steelers. Because for all the stuff we're talking about the Patriots, the Steelers have issues on top of issues. But we'll talk about them in just a bit. But before we do, let's move on from this because I don't want to talk about this anymore. You guys all brought up good points. Steve, you brought up excellent points. So kudos to both of you on this. But let's move on. Let's do our around the league topic. Steve, I'll let you lead us off here.
Well, it's, every week in the NFL is different. And, the overreaction every week to what happens on a Sunday is so ridiculous this year. It gets to the point of where you don't even want to watch anything because like a couple of weeks ago, the Rams were unbeatable. The Rams are you can't beat the Rams, blah, blah, blah. They go in and let's face it, the Bears played fantastic. All right. Shut them down. Now, all of a sudden, are the Rams a fraud? Oh, give me a break. And now, all of a sudden, Chicago is like, oh, you can't beat the Bears defense. Well, the Patriots played terrible and scored 35 points on them.
That's right.
In Chicago. You can't set your watch by anything that's happening. It goes week to week this year. I mean, we saw how the Patriots defense played last week against Minnesota. They play a much more inferior team, and they get ripped,
You never know, Steve. Good point. Derek, your thoughts on what Steve brought up here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is definitely an overreaction. I mean, I'm sure it made many people, many fans and media members alike, the Patriots lost this week. I'm sure it made their week. It is a week-to-week league, and everyone's always prisoner of the moment. The Rams are certainly not, untouchable, and the Bears did play fantastic football. I'll tell you, that defense, Khalil Mack is such an incredible force and has really helped transform that team. But, I mean, you could look up and down, and I think every team has kind of had their moment in the sun at some point, at least at the top of the list for contenders. So, I mean, hey, maybe Russ, that kind of gives you, someone who thinks that this team can still could still, be a Super Bowl contender. If you're looking at the Patriots and you're like, I'm not sure, well, you know what? The Patriots have looked like one of the best teams and have been consistently one of the best teams, for a long time. But just because, the Rams or the Chiefs or the Saints seem like they're much more talented, they've all looked like crap at one point or another. So it's not like, that the Patriots have like no shot, but it is
Right.
a week-to-week league, and every week people are going to say that this week's better than last week or the week before. I do think this was a very entertaining week in terms of NFL action, and it's certainly. I mean, you don't have to like the Miami, you don't have to like the Miami results, but it was a fascinating way for a game to end. I mean, really, that never works. It did. The Patriots were on the wrong side of it. I'll have to drink myself to sleep for the next 3 weeks to just get over it. But but at the end of the day, it was one of the most fascinating regular season finishes in NFL history, and that's just how it goes sometimes. You've been on the other side of that too.
Yep.
Where you've had one of the best finishes in Super Bowl history. So it happens to everybody, but it was a very good week of NFL action, although I do agree that it does feel like it's always so funny when people are like, this is the most amazing Sunday we've ever had until next week.
Sure. It's week to week, my friend. Over to you, Derek. Your topic.
Well, my topic was kind of in the same vein. It's just talking about the mix of teams that for both conferences that are in the playoffs. And it's funny because we're now sitting here about to enter week 15, which is amazing that it's already week 15 and also very sad. But you look at both conferences, and Russ, I start the show talking about Patriots and the Steelers potentially playing for the number 2 seed.
Yep.
You disagree because there's just so many other teams that are factors. There's still some games
Houston's
left.
a factor too, Derek.
I'm sorry?
You have to factor in Houston as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, my thing is that if you look at both conferences, there's not a whole lot set. There's still a lot up for grabs. It's going to be a very interesting shuffle for seeding and playoff opportunity in both conferences. And I think that you can look at a few of the teams and know, okay, they are going to be a threat. They're going to be contenders, etc. But as far as who's going to be playing on the road, who's playing at home, who the dark horses are going to be, I think you could look at a lot of different teams. I mean, the Chargers have been really peaking, and they're starting to get healthy, and they're playing really well on both sides of the ball. They could definitely have a problem. I don't think that you could look at the team that, I know everyone's in love with Patrick Mahomes for everything he does, and the kid is absolutely having an unbelievable season. But, everyone's talking about this no-look pass, from this last week. I'll tell you, it will not surprise me one bit if Patrick Mahomes in the playoff game absolutely, poops himself on stage, because that's what rookie quarterbacks do sometimes, and that happens. And you know what? Sometimes the Rams can't put up 56 points. Sometimes they only put up 6, and sometimes the Saints go from looking like an absolute balanced juggernaut to looking like they can't get out of their own way.
Right.
So there are going to be times for I don't think there is a team that I do think that there are a couple teams that have separated themselves, but I don't think that any one of those teams is unbeatable and there's nothing set. So really, I guess my topic is just talking about how there's nothing set in stone, even though it's week 15, and there's still a lot up for grabs with a few weeks left.
Okay, and I totally agree with you. Steve, thoughts on what Derek just shared, similar to what you were already talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And everyone talking about the Bears defense all of a sudden. You know whose defense I wouldn't want to be playing right now is the Dallas Cowboys. I've watched them the last couple of weeks.
Good point.
That defense is flying all over the field, and they're playing at a really high level right now.
I totally agree. That's a great point, Steve. Dallas looks like a different team now.
The Dallas defense is really fast. They're playing really good football right now, and I'm not totally enamored with their offense right now, but I'm telling you that's a defense that could steal a playoff game for you.
It's a great point. It really is, and no one's talking about Dallas. I'm glad that you actually brought them up, because I know why people don't want to focus too much on them, because they get enough focus already. But they stand out to me defensively. I'm glad that you brought that up. All right, guys, my topic's actually going to lead us into our preview of the Steelers game. And actually, what gave me the idea was Steve's other podcast that he does with Murph, One Patriots Place, and they had a wonderful guest on, Mike Giardi from the NFL Network. And the guys were going back and forth with Mike, talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Patriots and why the Steelers have not won more titles. Why haven't they? And Mike Giardi, I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the exact quote what he said, but he was talking about how they have all this talent and they've only won it once. Why? Why have they only won it once? And the conversation kept going back to the head coach, kept going back to Tomlin. But I never thought of it as it being a Tomlin issue. He's part of it. But I think what it really comes down to is what something that Mike Giardi said a little bit later in this conversation. Football intelligence. Now, this is different than just smart or dumb, just in general. This is football intelligence. It goes back to situational football, being aware. The Patriots tend to draft players that have very good football intelligence. Even though it didn't show itself against Miami, that was, to me, the exception to the rule. So my topic is this, guys. When we look at the Steelers and the Patriots, when we compare the two of them, one of the major reasons why I feel confident going into Pittsburgh has to do with how the Patriots have built their organization compared to the Steelers. The Patriots have built it about a full team, and they have surrounded themselves with coaches and players that tend to be high in football intelligence, whereas I believe the Pittsburgh Steelers focus more on talent and I guess you could say, and this is just my opinion, players that are more to do with themselves than team. They are more about how good they are than focusing more on the team. It does not seem like a team that focuses as a unit more about individuals playing within a team structure. That's the way I look at the Steelers compared to the Patriots.
Russ, I don't want to put you on the spot here.
Sure.
But name a couple players who you feel that way about. Or do you just feel about the culture? I mean, I don't understand.
The way that I look at it, Derek, it's the culture and the players within this culture, this me culture that they built for decades. And again, I mean, there are so many players. The best one I can give you is Joey Porter. Foote was another one of those defensive teams from the Steelers. Polamalu. These are all players that, to me, were about, again, it was more about their talent and their flash. And when they got
I don't agree with Polamalu, but I agree with your overall point. And I would say that for this present day Steelers team,
yep.
And I don't mean to jump all over your topic.
No, go ahead.
For this present day Steelers team, I think that's a reflection of their head coach. I think
he's a factor in it, but I think it goes deeper than that, Derek. I think it goes into the type of player that they bring into the organization.
Well, that may be true, but that's what happens when you have good coaching. Is the coaches put team first, and they
I agree with all
stuff.
that. That's a good point.
And I'm a firm believer that you look. I mean, every year, what do we hear when the preseason starts? Pittsburgh is one of the most talented teams across the board in the league,
right.
And yet they never win anything. And
right.
I think
and ask yourself the reason why. And this goes back.
I think it has everything to do with the coach.
Okay. I think he's a factor in it, Steve. Don't get me wrong, but I also think it's because, again, when you look at him and you look at the way that they handle situational football, it's not just all about Tomlin. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, but that's what situational football is. It's about coaching. It's about being prepared. And they what do we always say about Pittsburgh before the games? They are a do what we do team.
Exactly, Steve. They do what they do.
Right, and that's coaching. That's
okay.
That's 100% on coaching. And I mean, if you look at you put the Steelers and the Patriots next to each other,
yep,
every year, and who's the more talented team?
It's always the Steelers. It's always the Steelers.
You can make the point. Okay, yeah, Brady is a better quarterback, but Ben Roethlisberger is going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback. So the Patriots have no big advantage.
But I'm glad that you brought up Ben Roethlisberger because I don't think he has a lot of football intelligence, Steve. I don't think he's a smart quarterback.
And again, I think it's coaching. It's like what is the big thing about Roethlisberger every year? He extends plays, he tries to make the big play, and then makes mistakes. That's coaching.
Okay. So you put it more on Tomlin. I understand where you're going on it. I think it's a combination. I think it's also, again, situational football. I guess it's twofold because, like you said, because I put it on part of that culture there, Steve. And it doesn't sound like you see it as a culture issue. You see it more.
It is a culture because they don't change anything.
Right.
The Steelers have had 3 coaches since the 1960s.
Okay. So me putting up,
and it's amazing to me. Isn't it amazing to either of you guys that Tomlin is never on the hot seat?
Never. No, it's a great point. But me bringing up the topic football intelligence, so you don't really put it on, again, this isn't saying that the individual players or coaches aren't smart. It's when it comes to football intelligence, meaning, I put a lot of that on situational football, being at the right place, doing your job, as we would say here. The Steelers don't seem to be good at that, but you put that on Tomlin and the coaches.
Absolutely, because every year, what do we see every year with the Steelers? They always lose a game to a really terrible football team.
Okay.
I mean, every year we see that. And last week was another example. Now, the week before they lost to the Chargers, you say what you want, but the Chargers are a really good football team. Yeah, the Steelers blew it. But look at last week. Oakland Raiders are terrible. They are absolutely terrible. And Pittsburgh, who's still in the hunt for the number 2 seed, go in there, and then they lose. Okay. That's a terrible football team, and they lose every season.
Okay, I am actually going to concede this point to you because you actually proved your point based on what I'm about to say. Steve, you actually won this argument. You want to know why? Because the lunatics run the asylum, correct?
It's absolutely right.
Okay, then it does go back to coaching. So Steve won this conversation, which is good. Derek, your thoughts on all of this?
Well, I agree. That's what you can look at. I think you can look at every team in the league and find a lot of me-first players, a lot of guys who you don't have great football smarts. I feel like a lot, not only coaching, do you have to have a game plan for week to week, you have to manage your players. You have to manage the personalities. And it's not always the easiest thing to do. And I think that Mike Tomlin, he was a really good defensive coordinator, coaching prospect at one point for the Vikings. And everyone was like, he was the flavor of the month. Everyone really wanted Mike Tomlin as their next head coach. And he went to Pittsburgh, and now the only thing he does on the sideline is bang on his chest. So I just don't look at him as someone who has a great control of the team. And I look at the Steelers and I say, I don't trust them. I do think that they have me-first players. And I think there's nothing the Steelers love more than themselves. Everything about them.
I think that's part of my point, and I think that's part of the culture. But to Steve's point, he believes that it actually starts at the top with the coach, and it is lunatics running the asylum. And they do allow for that in Pittsburgh. Like you said, they do what they do, but it starts at the top. I actually go a little bit further, and I say the type of players that they bring in, again, are part of that culture. But I see where Steve puts it right on Tomlin and his coaching staff, and I understand why he's going there. All right, guys, we only have a few minutes left, so we have to really go into rapid fire on this. So, Steve, to you, Patriots defense versus the Steelers offense. In the running game and the passing game, who do you give the advantage to in these two matchups as we go through the matchups?
In the running game, I give it to the Steelers. I know James Conner still might not play.
Yep.
But after what we saw against the Dolphins, I give the advantage to Pittsburgh there because, and it's funny because, we talked about this yesterday with Mike Giardi, and Pittsburgh hasn't shown the gumption to want to run the ball. They want to throw it down the field, and if they're smart, which is debatable, they'll want to run a lot more this week because
agree.
what you saw, I think they can. In the passing game, I do give the advantage to the Steelers. They have a lot of weapons.
Okay.
They have a very good offensive line. That's the difference between the last two teams the Patriots have played. Last three teams, actually. They played three teams with pretty poor offensive line play. The Steelers have one of the better offensive lines in the NFL, and they do a really good job of protecting Roethlisberger.
Yep.
So we'll have to see how that plays out.
Okay. Derek, to you, I'm going to give you the Patriots offense and the Steelers defense. Running game and the passing game. Who do you give the advantage to in these two matchups?
Well, I have the Patriots in the air. I think that the Steelers have, their defense kind of ebbs and flows a little bit, and they've had a really, really tough time. They have a couple of good players on their defensive line, but they don't have a lot of depth there. Their cornerbacks as well, they've been kind of struggling. I think that you're going to see a big dose of Gronkowski in this game because he always seems to really have a good game. He's coming off a nice, solid game in Miami. I want to see if he can build on that performance. I think that you'll see Edelman and Gordon and everybody kind of get involved. I do think this will be one of those games where they try to take advantage of the linebackers with the running backs. You didn't see James White a whole lot last week, and I think a lot of that, some of it I think, or at least a portion of it, I put to the fact that maybe they're worried about his pitch count, how much, how many balls he's been getting, and they have to worry about his workload here down the stretch to make sure he's fresh enough. I do think you'll see James White back into the mix this week, and I think you'll see, you're going to see them run the ball, and as far as running the ball goes, I want to give the edge to the Patriots, but I'm not going to because we've seen the offensive line struggle on the road a lot this season. And how many yards has Sony Michel lost to penalties this year? He must. I don't know what his season total is, but
yeah.
you're looking at like 300 yards if Sony Michel lost running yards because of holding calls or something like that. It's unbelievable. But I think if you're looking at the passing game, the Patriots have the advantage. I'm going to give the Steelers advantage in the running game simply just because of what we've seen on the road so far this season, the pattern that we've seen. Although I know the Patriots are going to want to stay balanced and want to give the ball to Michel to try to keep the Steelers off balance.
Okay, excellent. Derek, let's get right into it quickly. Your three keys to victory and your prediction.
Well, my keys to the game this week are relatively simple. I think that for the Patriots, for one, you have to execute in the red zone. I know the Steelers don't have a great I know they don't have a great defense, but you're on the road. It's going to be a pretty loud atmosphere. It's going to be similar to a primetime game, even though it's a 4:25 start. You're going to have to come away with 7 more than 3, and you can't have some of these mental errors like what cost you in this game against Miami. And you're going to need to put up some points this week. So red zone execution to me is absolutely huge. Another key for me is going to be making sure that you don't get killed by big plays. Obviously, you have Antonio Brown and Juju Smith-Schuster, who are both excellent wide receivers. The Steelers do a great job scouting wide receivers in general. They seem to just pump out different guys every year. You have to make sure that you don't allow any big plays to get momentum on their side, especially early on. But you don't want to give that crowd any extra juice. You don't want to give that team any extra juice. And that's something that they made a mistake with last week. And, it kind of carried over the rest of the game. You have to make sure that you're eliminating big plays and make them earn it all the way up and down the field because I'm not sure that they can do that. My last key is we need Gronk to be Gronk in this game. In his 6 games against the Steelers, Gronkowski has 39 catches, 664 yards, and 8 touchdowns. He needs to continue that trend this week. I think that you could see him, being a big factor in this game.
Okay. All right. Steve, over to you.
Yeah, real quickly, as we know, the Steelers' defense is a do what we do type of thing. And Tom Brady has always had great success against them. So your number one key is protecting Brady and giving him time to throw. And I think, if they are able to do that, I think they're going to be very successful. I think this is going to be a week for the bigger guys, the bigger size guys. When I look at that defense, and I talked about this with Giardi, but he didn't seem too warm with the idea. I look at that defense, and Gronk has obviously averaged 106 yards a game against them. But guys like Josh Gordon, who's really coming into his own now, and Cordell Patterson, I think could have really a big impact against this secondary of theirs. And it all comes down to getting Brady time to throw the football. But I can see them using a lot bigger package this week in the passing game. I could be totally wrong on that, but we'll see. And the third one is, you have to be able to bring pressure on Roethlisberger, because this is a much better offensive line than they've faced. And, they've been good the last few weeks about getting pressure on the opposing quarterback. They've been very good about that. But it's going to be a lot tougher on them this week. They might have to get a little creative. And I think that I have my doubts about this team's mental makeup right now. After Belichick's comments yesterday, it kind of alarmed me a little bit when he said nobody died, which tells me that this team was shocked, and that's not a good thing. So let's hope they let's hope they shrug it off. But I think that Tom Brady will have a big game. I think the Patriots win a nail biter 31-27.
Okay. Derek, did you give a prediction?
I didn't. I think the Patriots are going to win 31-23. I think they respond this week. I don't really trust the team right now, but I trust Pittsburgh less. I think that they're struggling at a really bad time, and I think that you're going to look at New England and see them respond on the road and get a good win. I think I look for them to like I said, about a 7 to 8 point victory.
Okay. I think it's going to be close. I'm kind of with Steve. I'm going to say 35-31, but I do see the Patriots winning this game. This goes down to, again, every time they play Pittsburgh, and we were talking about it when I was going through my topic for around the league. I just think that teams that do what they do tend to lose against the Patriots because they will know that they just need to execute, and if they execute, they're going to win. I expect them to execute against the Steelers and win this game. But it's going to be a hard one. It's going to be a close one, and we'll see what happens. And I hope it's not the ending that we saw against Miami. That would be horrific 2 weeks in a row. But the Steelers are having a hard time right now. Let's take advantage of that. All right, great show, guys. Before we go, just want to mention one more time, if you do listen to us on Apple Podcasts, please leave us a rating and a review. That also helps other Patriots fans find us. And also listen to us on Spotify if that's how you listen to your music, because we're also on Spotify. Give us a follow if you're there. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Patriots 4th and 2. For my co-host, Steve Balistrieri and Derek Havens, I'm Russ Coleman. Thank you as always for listening to Patriots 4th and 2, the official podcast of PatsFans.com.